I don't mean to throw the vase. It just happens. 1 second, I'm holding it. This ridiculous, overpriced monstrosity of glass he bought on a whim last Christmas, claiming it spoke to him. The next, it's airborne, spiraling in slow motion before shattering against the wall. The sound is deafening, a sharp punctuation mark in the middle of our screaming match. Silence follows, heavy, suffocating. Jake stares at me, his mouth slightly open, his face caught somewhere between shock and disgust. I can see the vein in his temple twitching. It always does when he's trying not to lose it. But this time, I've gone too far. I know it. He knows it. And so does Claire. Claire, my best friend since college, is frozen in the doorway of our kitchen, her hand still clutching the mug she came over to borrow. Her eyes dart between Jake and me like she stumbled into a live grenade field and has no idea where to step. I can come back later, she says finally, her voice thin and awkward. No, I snap, sharper than I mean to. Stay. My voice softens as I turn to her, but my hands are trembling and I can't seem to unclench my jaw. It's fine. It's not fine, Jake cuts in, his voice low but vibrating with restrained fury. He gestures toward the glittering shards on the floor. You just threw a goddamn vase at me. It wasn't at you, I retort automatically, though we both know that's a lie. It wasn't meant to hit him, sure, but it was definitely aimed for impact. Jesus Christ, Mia, he mutters under his breath, running a hand through his hair. He looks exhausted, like he's aged 5 years in the last 5 minutes. What is wrong with you? And there it is, the question that always lingers unspoken between us but never gets answered. What is wrong with me? Where do I even start? I glance at Claire again. She looks like she wants to melt into the floor. Good. Let her feel uncomfortable for once, instead of sitting on her moral high horse every time Jake and I fight. I'll clean it up, I say finally, my voice tight as I grab a broom from the corner. No, Jake snaps, stepping forward and blocking my path with his arm. His tone has shifted, no longer angry but cold, detached in a way that makes my stomach churn. Don't bother. He turns to Claire without looking at me again and says flatly, You should go. Claire hesitates for a moment before nodding and backing out of the room like she's escaping a crime scene. The door clicks shut behind her, leaving Jake and me alone in the suffocating silence. I should apologize. That's what normal people do after they lose their temper and hurl expensive objects across the room during an argument about... What were we even arguing about? Oh right, his late nights at work and my suspicion that his work wife is more than just an office cliché. But instead of apologizing, I double down. You're overreacting, I say, crossing my arms over my chest like some petulant teenager instead of a 32-year-old woman who should know better by now. Jake laughs, a bitter, humorless sound that cuts deeper than any insult ever could. Overreacting? You're unbelievable. I hate that laugh. Hate how it makes me feel small and ridiculous and exposed all at once. So naturally, I lash out again. Well, maybe if you didn't spend so much time with your little office girlfriend. For God's sake, Mia. He explodes this time, his voice echoing off the walls of our too-small apartment. How many times do we have to go over this? There's nothing going on with Rachel. Nothing. Then why do you text her all hours of the night? My voice rises to match his as anger surges through me like wildfire. Because we work together. Because she's my friend. Because unlike you, she doesn't treat me like some kind of criminal every time I so much as breathe near another woman. The words hit harder than they should. Because deep down, I know he's right. But admitting that would mean acknowledging something ugly about myself. Something I've spent years burying under layers of sarcasm and deflection and carefully constructed excuses for why nothing is ever really my fault. So instead of owning up to it, I deflect again. Oh please, I sneer, rolling my eyes for maximum effect, even though tears are already pricking at their corners. Don't act like you're some innocent victim here. Jake doesn't respond this time. He just shakes his head slowly before turning away from me completely. His shoulders slumped under an invisible weight that feels heavier than anything either of us can carry alone anymore. For one brief moment, I want to reach out, to say something real, instead of hiding behind sarcasm or anger or whatever other defense mechanism comes easiest. But then he speaks again without looking back. I can't do this anymore. The words hang between us like smoke from a fire that neither one of us knows how to put out. And suddenly everything feels too quiet again, except for the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as reality starts sinking in. I might have just broken something we can't fix this time. And worse yet, I'm not even sure if part of me wanted to. Jake slams the bedroom door behind him, and the sound reverberates through the apartment like a gunshot. I flinch, but I don't move. My legs feel like lead, my arms hanging limply at my sides. The vase shards glitter on the floor in the dim light, mocking me with their jagged edges. I should clean it up. I should follow him, apologize, beg him to stay. But instead, I just stand there, staring at the wreckage like it's a crime scene, and I'm the only suspect. This is who I am, isn't it? The thought creeps in uninvited, slithering through the cracks in my defenses. A destroyer. A saboteur. Someone who ruins things just to see if she can put them back together again. The front door opens and closes softly, and I realize Claire has come back. Of course she has. She's always been too loyal for her own good. Mia? Her voice is cautious, like she's afraid I might throw something at her next. Are you okay? I laugh, a harsh, brittle sound that doesn't feel like it belongs to me. Do I look okay? She steps into the kitchen, her eyes flicking to the shattered vase before settling on me. What happened? What do you think happened? I snap, immediately regretting the venom in my tone but unable to stop myself. We fought. Again. Claire sighs and leans against the counter, crossing her arms over her chest. You need to stop doing this. Doing what? I challenge, even though I know exactly what she means. This. She gestures vaguely toward the mess on the floor and then at me, pushing him away every time he tries to get close to you. I open my mouth to argue, but no words come out because deep down, I know she's right. But admitting that would mean facing things about myself that I'm not ready to face yet, things that scare me more than losing Jake ever could. So instead, I deflect. Why are you even here? I ask coldly, narrowing my eyes at her. Don't you have your own life to deal with? Claire doesn't flinch. She never does. But there's a flicker of something in her expression that looks suspiciously like pity, and it makes me want to scream. I came back because I was worried about you, she says simply, her voice steady but not unkind. But if you don't want my help... I don't. I cut her off before she can finish because the truth is, I don't know what I want anymore. She studies me for a long moment before nodding slowly and turning toward the door again. But just as she reaches it, she pauses. You're going to lose him if you keep this up. She says softly without looking back, and then she's gone again, leaving me alone with nothing but my thoughts, and the sound of Jake moving around in the bedroom, packing maybe? The thought sends a jolt of panic through me, but instead of rushing after him, I grab a bottle of wine from the counter and pour myself a glass, because numbing myself feels easier than facing whatever comes next. The next morning, Jake is gone by the time I wake up, his side of the bed cold and untouched, and there's a note on the kitchen table written in his neat handwriting. I need some space. Don't call me. My chest tightens as I read it, but instead of feeling sadness or regret, I feel anger bubbling up inside me again, because how dare he leave like this? How dare he make me feel like I'm the problem when he's been lying to me for months about Rachel? I grab my phone and start typing a text before I can stop myself. Running away won't fix anything, but before I can hit send, I delete it, because deep down, I know it won't make a difference anyway. Instead, I spend the rest of the day alternating between pacing around our apartment like a caged animal and scrolling through Rachel's Instagram feed, looking for any hint of proof that Jake has been cheating on me, even though part of me knows it's all in my head. By evening, I'm spiraling, and when Claire shows up unannounced again, I don't even bother pretending everything is fine anymore. I think he's leaving me, I blurt out as soon as she walks through the door, and for once she doesn't try to sugarcoat things or tell me everything will be okay. Instead, she just sits down across from me at the table and says quietly, "Maybe he is." Her words hit harder than they should, but instead of breaking down, I feel something shift inside me, a spark of defiance, or maybe desperation, as I realize that if Jake really is leaving, it won't be without a fight. I don't sleep that night. I sit on the couch with my knees pulled to my chest, staring at the darkened TV screen, replaying every fight Jake and I have ever had, like some masochistic highlight reel. The vase wasn't the first thing I've broken in this apartment. Not by a long shot. A picture frame last month, a wine glass the month before that. But this time feels different. By morning, I'm jittery from too much coffee and not enough rest, but I've made up my mind. I'm not gonna let him walk away without hearing me out. Without understanding that I'm the one who's been wronged here. That he's the one who pushed me to this point. I grab my phone and call him, ignoring the note he left. It rings twice before going to voicemail. Typical. He's always been good at avoiding conflict when it suits him. "Jake, it's me," I say after the beep, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound calm. "We need to talk. You can't just leave like this. Call me back." I hang up and throw the phone onto the couch, pacing the room like a caged animal. Minutes feel like hours as I wait for a response that doesn't come. By noon, I've worked myself into a frenzy. If he won't come to me, I'll go to him. I know where he is. He always goes to his brother's place when we fight. It's his safe haven, his escape from me. The drive across town is a blur of red lights and honking horns as I weave through traffic, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. By the time I pull up outside his brother's house, my heart is pounding so hard it feels like it might burst out of my chest. I don't bother knocking. I just push the door open and step inside, ignoring the startled look on his brother's face as he stands in the kitchen with a cup of coffee in hand. "Where is he?" I demand, my voice sharper than I intend. "He doesn't want to see you right now," his brother says calmly, setting down his mug and crossing his arms over his chest like some kind of human barricade. "I don't care what he wants," I snap, pushing past him toward the living room where Jake is sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. He looks up as I enter, and for a moment, there's something in his eyes that almost looks like relief. But it's gone as quickly as it came, replaced by exhaustion and something else. Something colder. "What are you doing here?" he asks quietly, his voice devoid of any emotion. "We need to talk," I say firmly, planting myself in front of him like a soldier preparing for battle. "There's nothing left to talk about," he replies without meeting my gaze. "Don't do this," I plead, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to stay composed. "Don't throw everything away over one stupid fight." "It's not just one fight," he says finally, looking up at me with an intensity that makes my stomach churn. "It's all of them. It's everything." His words hit harder than any punch ever could, because deep down, I know he's right. But instead of admitting it, I lash out again. "So what? You're just going to run away like a coward? Is that who you are now?" Jake flinches at my words but doesn't respond. And for once, I don't know if that makes me feel victorious or just empty. The silence stretches between us until his brother clears his throat awkwardly from the doorway. "Maybe you two should take this somewhere else," he suggests carefully, but Jake shakes his head. "No," he says firmly before standing up and looking me straight in the eye. "We're done." The finality in his tone sends a jolt of panic through me, but before I can respond, he walks past me toward the door. And just like that, it's over. I stand there, frozen, as the door slams behind him. The sound echoes in my ears, louder than it should be, and for a moment, I can't breathe. My chest tightens, my throat constricts, and the room feels like it's closing in on me. "We're done." The words replay in my head, over and over like a broken record. He's never said that before. Not like this. Not with such finality. "You should go," his brother says quietly from behind me, his voice soft but firm. I turn to face him, my vision blurred with unshed tears. "He didn't mean it," I say, my voice trembling. "He just needs time." His brother doesn't respond right away. Instead, he looks at me with an expression I can't quite place. Pity? Disappointment? Maybe both. "Mia," he says finally, his tone measured but unyielding. "You need to let him go." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment I feel like I might collapse. But then the anger kicks in, the familiar fire that always burns hottest when I feel cornered. "You don't know what you're talking about," I snap, my voice rising despite the lump in my throat. "This is none of your business." He sighs and shakes his head. "It became my business the moment you started dragging him down with you." The accusation stings more than it should, because deep down, I know he's right. But admitting that would mean confronting parts of myself I've spent years avoiding, parts I'm not sure I know how to fix. So instead, I leave. The drive back to our apartment is a blur of tears and rage and self-loathing. By the time I get home, the sun has set, casting long shadows across the walls. The silence is deafening, and for the first time in years, I feel truly alone. I pour myself another glass of wine, my third, fourth. I've lost count, and sink into the couch, staring at the empty space where Jake's favorite chair used to be before he moved it into storage last month. He said it didn't fit with the new decor. But now I wonder if it was just another sign of him pulling away. Another clue I ignored because it was easier than facing the truth. My phone buzzes on the coffee table, and for a brief, fleeting moment, hope flares in my chest. Maybe it's Jake. Maybe he's changed his mind, but when I pick it up, it's Claire. I almost don't answer. I'm not in the mood for another lecture, but something in me craves connection, even if it's not the one I want. "What?" I say when I pick up, my voice sharper than intended. "Are you okay?" she asks cautiously. "No," I admit, because lying feels pointless right now. "I think he's really gone this time." There's a pause on the other end of the line before she speaks again. "Mia, maybe this is for the best." Her words ignite something in me, a spark of defiance or maybe desperation, and before I can stop myself, I lash out. "Don't pretend you're on his side now," I snap. "You've always hated him." "That's not true," she says evenly, though there's an edge to her voice now too. "I just hate what you've become when you're with him." The words cut deeper than they should because part of me knows she's right, but instead of admitting it, I hang up. The next few days pass in a haze of wine and self-pity and endless scrolling through Jake's social media accounts looking for any hint of where he might be or what he might be doing, or worse, who he might be doing it with. But then, on the third day, I see it, a photo of him at some bar downtown with Rachel, the woman who started all of this. Or at least that's what I tell myself as jealousy and rage bubble up inside me all over again. Without thinking, I grab my keys and head out, driven by some primal need to confront them both, to make them see what they've done to me, to us. Even though part of me knows this won't end well. The cold night air envelops me as I step off the curb, each step feeling like a descent into the dark recesses of my own guilt and despair. My mind replays the confrontation in the lounge. The desperate words, the quiet admissions, the painful unveiling of my own self-deception over and over again. I didn't aim to discover these truths in front of strangers, but now that I have, there's no turning back. I drive home with numb determination. Once back in our empty apartment, every silent room reminds me of what's been lost. I wander through our living space like a specter, touching the remnants of our shared life. The half-folded laundry on the sofa, the coffee mug on the counter, the quiet ticking of a clock that now sounds like judgment. Every broken piece of furniture, every shattered memory reverberates with the weight of my mistakes. In the days that follow, nothing is ever the same. Jake's absence looms over every corner of the apartment and over my every thought. I begin to peel away the layers of denial I've built for so long. Late at night, when the darkness presses close, I find myself scribbling in an old journal, an admission of every lie I told myself and every manipulation I inflicted on our love. I write until my hand cramps from the raw honesty that spills out onto the pages, a confession of insecurities, of bitterness, and of the desperate need to be seen as someone other than the villain in my own tragic tale. The consequences are immediate. Friends who once stayed by our side now keep their distance, powerless to mend a heart that has inflicted so much pain on itself and others. Claire, whose loyalty has been my anchor and my trial by fire, stops visiting. "I can't watch you self-destroy," she texts one evening, her message a painful epitaph for our once unshakable bond. And even strangers on the street see me differently now, a haunted woman carrying the scars of a failed attempt at control and vengeance. Yet amid the ruins of our fractured relationship, I start to notice subtle transformations. My nights of self-flagellation begin to give way to moments of quiet introspection. I attend a support group for those grappling with toxic relational patterns, where I slowly begin to unspool the tangled mess of my past. There, in the circle of others who share their scars with unguarded voices, I meet Harper, A woman whose scarred smile and resilient spirit remind me that there's hope beyond the wreckage. Harper's plain-spoken compassion is a mirror showing me what honesty with oneself can look like. "We're all works in progress, Mia," she tells me softly one evening after the meeting. "Sometimes, the only way out is to face the darkness in ourselves, one brutal truth at a time." In that moment, a seed of self-awareness, long buried beneath my anger and need to control, begins to sprout. I understand now that every attacking word meant to force Jake away was also driving me further from the real me. Every accusation was just a desperate cry for help, a misplaced attempt to make sense of the chaos inside. Weeks merge into months, and slowly the sharp edges of loss and regret begin to dull. I leave the apartment that once symbolized everything we tore apart, seeking a fresh start in a modest studio with sunlight streaming through the windows, a stark contrast to the shadowed corridors of our past. The end of my relationship with Jake was irreversible, but it paved the way for a painful kind of rebirth. I start therapy, exploring not only the wounds of our breakup, but also the intricacies of my own self-deception. In those vulnerable sessions, I learn the courage to admit I've been using anger as a shield, as a way to avoid the truth that I'm scared. Each confession, each tear shed in the quiet of that room, is a step toward reclaiming parts of myself I thought were forever lost. One chilly evening, after a long session of raw introspection, I stumble upon a note tucked away in one of my old boxes, a note Jake had scribbled during happier times. It reads, "I once believed in us because I believed in you." Those words haunt me, not as a reminder of regret, but as an impetus to honor the person I used to be, and could be again, if I learned to rebuild from honest ground up. It's a reminder that love, in its purest form, isn't about control or manipulation. It's about trust, compassion, and forgiveness. As I walk through my new neighborhood one crisp morning, I pass a park where the early sun casts long, forgiving golden rays through the trees. A couple laughs on a bench, unburdened by secrets. A child runs carefree and unafraid of the future. In that moment, I decide that my final act of reckoning will be to let go of what I once tried to hold on to so desperately. I send one last, silent goodbye to the echo of a life built on lies. A farewell not just to Jake, but to the parts of me that thrived on hurt and deception. I'll never change the past. The manipulations, the gaslighting, the endless arguments, they're indelibly etched into the story of who I was. But now, as I rebuild the quiet, honest life of a woman who has learned through excruciating loss, I hold on to a fragile hope. I hope that someday I can forgive myself as I begin to forgive others. I hope that in embracing these lessons, I'll find redemption in the honest, albeit painful truth of my own existence. I step forward into a future uncharted, aware that the scars remain, that the mistakes I made are permanent teachers of my own humanity. But now each step is measured, deliberate, and infused with a raw determination to live in full view of my vulnerabilities, to be unafraid of the dark, and to trust in the possibility of light.